Peter allowed the winds and the waves to blow, the wind to blow on it and cause terror. But David's taking the ember, and instead of putting it in his own heart and kind of like managing it himself, he's putting it in God's furnace and saying, "Here, I got this ember, but I don't want it. I want you to manage it for me." He's giving it completely over to God, and then God is flaming it into a faith. So I think what you have with worry, is you have like two things that can come out. If you harbor it and manage it and let it grow, right, it becomes fear, it becomes terror, it becomes terrible, evil actions in your own life. But if you take your worries and you give them over to God, then He can turn them into faith. Welcome to Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. I'm Timothy.
And I'm Caleb.
And you're listening to Bible Discussions, the forum where we explore biblical topics that are relevant to your life. Today we are continuing our series on the 30 sayings of the wise from the book of Proverbs. And this episode is saying number 29. And we're entitling it, "What Are You Worried About?" So let's go ahead and read that. It's Proverbs 24, verses 19 and 20.
Do not fret because of evildoers, or be envious of the wicked, for the evildoer has no future hope, and the lamp of the wicked will be snuffed out.
So this is almost identical to a saying we had in episode 15, which is about 14 episodes ago. And that was Proverbs 23, verses 17 and 18, which said, "Do not let your heart envy sinners, but always be zealous for the fear of the Lord. There is surely a future hope for you, and your hope will not be cut off."
Yeah, very similar. Both talk about a future hope. Only the saying 15 kind of emphasized the faithful person's future hope, and the saying 29 is emphasizing that the evildoer has no future hope.
Yes.
But really the main difference is the word fret. They both talk about being envious. This week's saying says, "Do not fret."
Yeah. And Solomon, it sounds like he's repeating himself. Like this one sounds like he's talking about the same thing.
He's done this with boundary stones and
we've had all these other repetitive sayings, and if you listen to a lot of them, they're about things you're worried about. And that's why we're calling this episode "What Are You Worried About?" Because it's like Solomon and whoever is helping him compile these sayings over the years are focusing on what are the things people worry about all the time, and how can we help them cope with that process, right?
Yeah.
I think this one especially, as we're getting toward the end of the sayings, is especially trying to help us cope with this problem of worrying or fretting about the things we don't have, and how can we get them in. Why would we try to get them in ways that are unscrupulous or even evil, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one of the themes of the sayings of the wise. Like, don't take things into your own hands. We've seen that a lot, where it's like, don't band together with other people to plot and scheme and all that. We've talked about exploitation of the poor. Mm-hmm. Like, you'd only do that. Why would you exploit a poor person unless you're just worried about taking care of number one? And we talked about anger, theft. So there's been all these themes, and there's been other people trying to urge you to do them with them. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like the long-lasting themes or threads that have run through all 30 sayings.
Yeah, and kind of the thread there would be that you're basically worried God's not going to take care of you. Like, you need to step up and handle it yourself at kind of any cost. Yeah. So that word "fret" is what we're going to focus on. Yeah.
Yeah, so that is, in this verse, it was the word tethar, but it comes from the root word chara, which means to glow. It's sort of the idea of like to brighten up, like to glow like an ember, that's glowing, and it could just flame up at any time. And so if you blow on it, right, it might flame up. And so that's kind of the idea behind this, is you've got this glowing ember of greed or envy or whatever, but the danger is that you're keeping it there at the ready so that it can flame up, right, when you want it to, or quote unquote don't want it to,
Right.
Oh, I didn't mean
It kind of makes like it's a lack of self control.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's like in the moment you would feel like it's not you. It's like all these circumstances happening to you are making you make the bad decisions. But it goes back to the fact that you've been carefully taking care of this, bitterness, this envy, whatever anger, whatever it is that you're kind of keeping as an ember. Then when the bad circumstances come, it flames up.
And that's where you see the difference between wisdom and folly, right? Because the fool is like, I'm going to keep that ember handy nearby, so that when it flames up, I benefit from it in some way. And the wise person is like, I'm going to make sure that that ember doesn't get any air blown on it, so I don't lose my self-control and do something I shouldn't want. And that's what all of these have been trying to help you to plan in advance. Hey, don't let this happen to you, because it's right below the surface, and it could come to the surface at any time, right? So worrying and fretting is a way of keeping your bad habits right at hand so that they can become bad actions.
Yeah.
So don't do that.
You're just waiting for the big excuse to let them out.
Yeah, exactly. And
so I keep it under control when everything's normal, right? But I'm always worried that something's going to happen. So then that's when it blows up.
And the sayings of the wise are trying to tell you that if you are wise and you know these things, you'll keep them under control. So it's not just the Old Testament that talked about this. Jesus talked about it. Is it really interesting passage that Caleb found, where Jesus is worried about a guy who he thinks is about to make some really bad decisions because he's cradling that ember of greed. So it's in Luke 12, verses 13 through 34.
Yeah. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Well, I thought Jesus wanted us to have life abundantly.
Yeah. Well, that's true.
Maybe his definition wasn't material wealth.
Maybe not. So we're going to take a little break right here in the reading, and we'll pick back up in a second. But see, Jesus, you can see the concern he has for this guy, his mind, right? Because he says to him, "Watch out." Like, hey, buddy, look, you're about to run into a collision here. And he can see that he's glowing with this greed and this envy. And Jesus is trying to help him cool down, that, and not let that flame up into evil action. And so he continues speaking to him and to the crowd.
And he told them this parable: "The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, 'What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops.' Then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself?' This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." Then Jesus told his disciples, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat, or about your body, what you will wear. For life is more than food, and the body more than clothes. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap, they have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable you are than birds. Who of you by worrying can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? Consider how the wildflowers grow. They do not labor or spin, yet I tell you, not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. If that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, how much more will he clothe you, you of little faith? And do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it, for the pagan world runs after all such things, and your Father knows that you need them. But seek his kingdom, and these things will be given to you as well. Do not be afraid, little flock, for your Father has been pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." So I know that was long, right? And I mean, the first place, one of the first places your mind has to go in the Bible when you're thinking about worry is, right, where he says, "Look at the birds of the field, or birds of the air, the flowers of the field." Right? Like that's a really famous passage. But I went there, and Jesus says, "Therefore," and I hate starting a passage with with "therefore." It's like
Yeah.
you're ripping it out of context. So what's the full context? Well, we look at that young guy asking, make my brother split the inheritance with me. And then Jesus tells that parable about the rich man who has an abundant yield. And I think he's telling the guy, look, you are what you are complaining about. You're saying, my brother's greedy. He's got a surplus and he won't share it with me. It's like, you are greedy. If the situation were reversed, you would make the same decision as him or as this rich man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which of you by worrying can add a year to your life? The rich man thinks, I've got grain stored up for years. And God's like, well, guess what? You don't have years. So
yeah.
if you can't control that, what good is it controlling everything else?
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about the birds and the flowers is, they're part of nature, and nature is made to work by God. Like, it just works. And all the birds and all the flowers depend on that. That's just sort of taken for granted. It's like their background.
It's the circle of life.
Yeah, but we have a hard time with that, right? I thought it was interesting what the one line that Jesus said, do not set, in verse 29, he says, do not set your heart on what you will eat or drink. Do not worry about it.
Yeah. That's like Paul saying their God is their stomach, right? That they're driven by that. That's all they care about.
Yeah. I mean, if you think of the heart as the little furnace that's holding your ember, you've got in there, I know what I want. If I don't get it, then God's not nice.
Yeah.
I know I want it, get it at all costs, and God won't give it to me. But
yeah, that's one of the ways I've heard worry and doubt defined. I keep hearing this come up recently. I don't know who it originates with, but basically, doubt or worry is when you know what needs to happen, but you're afraid God's not going to get with the program. Like, well, I know what I need, but I'm afraid He's not going to give me that, so I better get it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so it's all through this story. This is worry, fret, doubt, all these same themes that are run through everything we just read.
Yeah, and if we think about our episode on the first commandment, right? We talked about defining it as, have no other gods before God. We define that partially as fearing, loving, and trusting God above all things. And this is not trusting Him, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is not recognizing that He has your best interest in mind. You think you know better, and He's not going to give you what you want, so you better go and do it yourself. You're going to trust in your own strength. You're going to trust in your wealth, like the rich man in the parable.
Yeah. Yeah, which, like we got done talking about just a few minutes ago, that's what almost all the sayings of the wise have been about. Don't think like that.
Yeah, and so you end up making security or wealth or whatever you trust in, power, whatever you think is going to give you that security and give you what you want, that becomes your God.
Mm-hmm. So you can see how this worked, like with the rich man, because Jesus told the man that came to him, watch out. Mm-hmm. And then he tells him the story. And with the rich man, he has a decision he has to make. He has way more food come in than he expected from his crops. Mm-hmm. So what are your options? Well, it doesn't talk about any of the other options. The guy just immediately says, I'm building bigger barns and keeping it all for myself. Then I can just rest at ease, which is the opposite of worrying, right?
Yeah.
As obviously what he's worried about is how much will I have?
It's not. The problem is that it's not. You will still be worried. Like Solomon talks about this in Ecclesiastes, that the more a man has, the more he worries about it, and he can't enjoy it. Because he's so preoccupied with maintaining it all.
That's his thought process.
Yeah.
That's his thought process, though,
right.
That he's wrong, but that's his thought process. And so he decides immediately just build bigger barns. He doesn't even say in the story, Jesus doesn't say, the guy said, well, I guess I could share it with everybody in my community since I have way more than I ever expected.
Yeah.
Well, that would be another option.
Yeah, I mean, he could support the community, invest in those around him. I mean, this guy wasn't out harvesting it himself in the first place, right? He would have had servants and laborers who were doing all the work.
Yeah,
like he could reward them for that. Could trust them with more.
Yeah,
it's just it feels like he's thinking long term because he's like, oh, I've got plenty for years down the road, but he's not really.
Yeah, the difference is he has this ember of greed that he keeps in his heart, and so when he has to make a decision, it immediately flames up and says,
Yeah,
do the
what's
greedy thing.
interesting is earlier we said you have this ember, and when challenges come, when bad things come, then you're gonna let it out in the anger or the lust or whatever.
It blows on it.
But this was a blessing. Like, so you're actually, if you maintain that ember, you're actually capable of turning God's blessings into a bad situation, right? Because you can't even use it properly or be grateful for it.
Yeah.
Tragic.
And so,
woe to those who call good evil and evil good.
Yeah. So the Bible's full of stories of people's faith or the failure of people's faith, and worry has a lot to do with some of those stories. Here's another one in Matthew 14 verses 25 through 30. It says, shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It is a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and, beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You of little faith, he said, why did you doubt? And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God.
Yeah, so, I mean, doubt there, I think, is kind of the same as worrying, right? And that question, why did you doubt? It's like, because I was standing in the middle of a lake, which is not supposed to happen, surrounded by wind and waves. I don't think that's my natural habitat. Like, the reasons can seem so obvious and so overwhelming, right? And going back to like what Jesus said, your heavenly Father knows that you need like food and drink, or in Peter's case, oxygen, when he's going to start drowning, or firm land to stand on. He knows that we need these things, and obviously there are evil forces in the world, and there are things that threaten our, very well-being. He knows that, and that I think that was part of the object lesson here. Is right.
Well, for our purposes of our lesson, it's kind of a transitional story here because the first guy, he didn't even stop to think about the good things he could have done. He just jumped right to his greed and built bigger barns. In Peter's case, I think all of us have an ember of fear, of worry over drowning,
especially
right. And some people won't even get on a ship, like a cruise ship or boat or anything, like terrified, won't get in a canoe, don't even like to go to the beach, scared of sharks or something. I don't know. But we all have this justifiable fear of water and of the ocean and of our kids being around it, babies being around it, So it doesn't take much, right, to blow on that ember and have a big terror come out of it. And so we see in Peter's case, he does hand his fears over to God. So he's kind of like
the last minute,
half and half, right? He gives them all over to God. Says,
well, he asked
if you
to come
tell
out,
me,
right?
if you tell me, I come out there. If you say it's okay, I'm worried about it, but I'll believe you. And so
he's one step ahead of the rich man.
Yeah. So he weighs it out and makes the right choice. Goes out on the water, and then he suddenly he's like, "Uh-oh, wait a minute, I'm scared of this," and he takes the fear, the doubt, the worry back from Christ, and it turns into terror.
Yeah, I think if he had the excess crop like the rich man, he would have given it all away and then immediately freaked out.
And what am I going to do? Yeah, something like that.
I think Jesus is kind of teaching them an object lesson here, right? Because this is also like he like the other story. As soon as he gets in the boat, the wind and waves die down, and they all worship him. Part of the object lesson is God is the God of the whole earth. Like, what is that? Psalm 24:1, I think. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, including the wind and the waves, right? That are about to engulf Peter or the evildoers or other evil forces in the world around you. Like, he knows what you need. He knows that there are these things threatening to take them away, and he's God of that too. He's in charge of it. There is no other God. So He has it. It's working according to his design.
Right.
Speaking of being surrounded by evildoers, right? That makes me think of David. So we're going to go back to the Old Testament here
Yeah.
and read all of Psalm 56, which is not 150 verses like Psalm 119. A little detail here I think is really nice at the beginning of the psalm. Some of the psalms are like this. It gives you a lot of detail about like the writing of the psalm, and it's kind of cool that that's survived this long. So Psalm 56, for the director of music to the tune of A Dove on Distant Oaks, of David and Michtam, when the Philistines had seized him in Gath. Be merciful to me, my God, for my enemies are in hot pursuit. All day long they press their attack. My adversaries pursue me all day long. In their pride, many are attacking me. When I am afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise, in God I trust and am not afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? All day long they twist my words. All their schemes are for my ruin. They conspire, they lurk, they watch my steps, hoping to take my life. Because of their wickedness, do not let them escape. In your anger, God, bring the nations down. Record my misery. List my tears on your scroll. Are they not in your record? Then my enemies will turn back when I call for help. By this I will know that God is for me. In God, whose word I praise, in the Lord, whose word I praise, in God I trust and am not afraid. What can man do to me? I am under vows to you, my God. I will present my thank offerings to you, for you have delivered me from death and my feet from stumbling, that I may walk before God in the light of life. There's a lot in there, right? Like, speaking of repetition, 3 times he says, in God, whose name I praise, right? That's who I trust in, which is part of Hebrew poetry, that repetition. So, and I love, like I said, that it gives us the historical context. It looked like it was over for David. He was captured by the Philistines in Gath. All right, remember that song that the people sang? Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed tens of thousands, and they're mostly talking about Philistines. So, this is like capturing Osama bin Laden, right, for America, or like you're not. This is not going to end well for for you if you're that guy who's the people that you've been fighting finally catch you.
Mm-hmm.
But he trusted in God's promises to him. God had promised him he would sit on the throne and his seed would rule Israel forever, and he's trusting that. So especially, I think the coolest part of that psalm, list my tears on your scroll. Are they not in your record? Like, that's awesome, right? He's as he's crying out to God, he's kind of acknowledging what we talked about earlier, like all the evil things surrounding him. But like Jesus says, he knows what you need. And I think David's kind of acknowledging that. He's saying, look, I'm pretty much miserable, and it doesn't look like there's a way out of this one, but I'm trusting in you.
That's why I was saying that the Peter story was kind of transitional in our lesson, because we started from totally faithless, and we went to kind of half and half, and then with David, he's completely in trusting God for everything. So that ember that David has, whereas the rich man just allowed to blow on it and flame up into greedy actions. Peter allowed the winds and the waves to blow, the wind to blow on it and cause terror. Yeah. But David's taking the ember, and instead of putting it in his own heart and kind of like managing it himself, he's putting it in God's furnace and saying, "Here, I got this ember, but I don't want it. I want you to manage it for me." He's giving it completely over to God, and then God is flaming it into a faith. So I think what you have with worry, is you have like 2 things that can come out. If you harbor it and manage it and let it grow, right, it becomes fear, it becomes terror, it becomes terrible, evil actions in your own life. But if you take your worries and you give them over to God, then he can turn them into faith.
Right. And I mean, again, like we said, in the parable, the rich man has a good thing happen to him, but because he's harboring this ember, even the blessings from God, he just abuses them, right? And turns them into it's a curse for everyone else, because they're like scraping by, and he's got these barns full of food that he won't share. And Peter, like in the middle of a storm, he's like, well, this would be a cool opportunity to, like, I believe Jesus is God of this lake. I bet he could help me walk out to him. And then he panics. And then David is is right again captured by his enemies, and both he and Peter take that as an opportunity to trust in God. He just seems to see it through a little better than Peter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that. List my tears on your scroll. Are they not in your record? Like, you can cry out to God. He knows what you need. I think about, all through the Old Testament, even though they're constantly unfaithful to him, keep saying God heard the cries of his people, right? Every time there's like the Exodus, or like he'll rise up a judge or something, or a prophet, when they're being, invaded or in captivity, he always hears the cries of his people. And I think the worst mistake we can make is to think we do not need to cry out to him. Like, even having all these promises, we're not stoics. We're not just sitting there like, I will weather any storm. Like, he wants you to communicate to him. And this made me think something. I don't know if we've talked about it before. I just wanted to touch on it. You have these teachers nowadays that teach this word of faith doctrine, which is bad. I mean, it's harmful because it teaches the opposite of this. I have heard pastors who, I wouldn't even want to call them pastors, but I've heard these leaders, these teachers who will tell you explicitly, you don't ask God for help, right? If you're facing sickness or whatever, you don't ask God for help. You declare it. You declare, in the name of Jesus, this will be gone. And it's like, David, that's the opposite of what he's doing here, right? Like, David had been given authority. He's already anointed as king. He knows that, but you don't see him flaunting it around. He doesn't walk up to Saul and smack him in the face and be like, "Get out of here," which is probably why he survived as long as he did on the run. He remained humble and supplicant before God. And in verse 2 of this psalm, right, it said that his enemies are prideful. In their pride, they're pursuing him. And like you said, he had the embers that he could have kind of fueled his worry and wanting to take control of the situation, right?
Yeah.
And you even see him tempted to do this, right, with his men, like when he's in the cave. I know we didn't read this here, but that's a famous story where they're hiding in a cave and Saul comes in there to relieve himself, and David's men are like, "This is your chance, go kill him." He's like, "I'm not doing that. It's in God's hands. I'm not taking control of everything and try to make it happen myself."
Yeah. Well, because Saul was God's anointed as well. And David said he wouldn't lift his hand against God's anointed. So, if God's ordained it, then I'm not going to try to change it.
And that's the thing. Like, what's happening around us cannot happen without God's permission. Like Job, right? Satan wants to bring all these things against him, and he has to get God's permission. So, even what seems bad to us is still, in a way, it's God ordained. So I wanted to read this excerpt from one of Chrysostom's homilies. One of his sermons is from his before he was sent into exile. He has a series of sermons. And this passage I thought was really cool because it touches on everything we've talked about here. And he quotes so much scripture in such a short amount of time. He says, "What are we to fear? Death? Life to me means Christ, and death is gain." That's Philippians 1:21. Exile? The earth and its fullness belong to the Lord. There's Psalm 24:1. The confiscation of goods? We brought nothing into this world, and we shall surely take nothing from it. That's Job 1:21. If Christ is with me, whom shall I fear? Though the waves and the sea and the anger of princes are aroused against me, they are less to me than a spider's web. So, fret not. Yes, there's evil surrounding you, but why are we afraid of it? God has it in his control. Chrysostom even, because he's such a faithful Biblocus subscriber, he even included Peter's waves and sea and David's angry Philistine princes as examples, right?
And he's not even afraid of spiders. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's really impressive.
All right, well, cool. So lots to think about. I know a lot of people struggle with this. It varies from person to person. Some people are pretty sanguine about what's going on around them. Other people freak out, about what's going on around them. But I think we can all benefit from the examples that we saw, both negative and positive, as we look through the biblical lesson here, and from the church fathers and so on. So our wise words takeaway for this week is we can trust God in all things. So hand all your worries to him.
Yeah. Jesus trusted the Father, right? Like he prays in the garden to take the cup from him,
Mm-hmm.
but he ultimately submits to the Father's will. So he goes to the cross. I wanted to end with this stanza from Paul Gerhardt's hymn, "Why Should Cross and Trial Grieve Me?" That's a great hymn. I'd highly recommend looking it up. You'll find different versions of it, like kind of more archaic translations, but any of them are pretty good. So there's this stanza where he says, "God gives me my days of gladness, and I will trust him still when he sends me sadness. God is good, his love attends me. Day by day, come what may, guides me and defends me." I love that line. Job basically says that to his wife, right? When she's saying, "Curse God and die. God gives me my days of gladness, and I'll trust him still when he sends me sadness." It says, do we accept, blessings from the Lord and not evil?
Mm-hmm.
He knows God is sovereign over this, and he has a plan, even though it may not make sense to us.
Yeah.
And we can follow Jesus into our cross, into our suffering, and know what awaits us on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. So, where can you find a group of people who, aren't worried all the time about whether God's going to take care of them? They're trying to trust God to take care of everything.
Yeah, well, I'd say our success varies on that. We probably are worried a lot, but Jesus has promised to be with us always, right? And in particular, wherever 2 or 3 gather in his name. So you got to go to church. You can't do that from your living room,
Yeah. There's a certain strength that you gather from being around a body of believers too.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps you with worrying, if worrying is something that you struggle with.
Yeah. And he's given us a particular promise to be with the church. So when you go to a church and when you're in communion with the body of Christ, with the whole church, then he's there because he's promised to be.
Yeah. Okay, well, he's Caleb and I'm Timothy. And thank you for listening to Bible Discussions on Biblocus, where the Bible intersects with your life. Please consider subscribing to our channel to help support our efforts. All scripture quotations, unless otherwise indicated, are taken from the Holy Bible, New International Version, NIV, copyright by Biblica Inc., used by permission of Zondervan, all rights reserved. Biblocus is a registered trademark. This program is copyright 2025 by Timothy Klingerman. God bless all of you.